Welcome everyone to our track on caring and community. Now the first session is curating indigenous games. We invite you all to share your names in the chat. We will be sharing all the necessary info. And for this session, I have the pleasure of introducing you, for those who don't know, but I think everyone already knows at this point, Marie LeBlanc Flanagan, because she's everywhere, she's amazing, she's so inspiring. And she will be hosting this session with Hexe Fey. Marie, the floor is yours. I will copy your bio in the chat.
Thank you so much, Lou. Yeah, I'm very, very happy to be here today with Hex. Hexe Fey is an interdisciplinary games maker, curator, dancer, nerd, transsexual, Oglala, Lakota, and European. And Hex today is going to lead us in a hybrid talk workshop, drawing from their personal experience and work within the Indigenous games community. And they will share their best practices for supporting the growth of this community and increasing the visibility of their productions. And this session will offer an opportunity to everyone to learn and engage with the unique challenges and opportunities in curating Indigenous games. And yeah, Hex, I'm so happy to be here with you, and I'm going to hand it right over to you.
Anyway, thank you, Marie. Thank you, Lou. Thank you for everyone for, bearing with us while things don't work properly. Yeah. Let's see here. I was gonna share some slides with y'all. Yay. So, yeah, this is basically like some useful tools that I have gleaned from doing the work that I do in my community, and also within like Indigenous games, and also in my like larger work doing harm reduction in communities as well. Trying to design this was a little bit anxiety inducing because I can only present tools that I personally have experience with. I can't represent any other Indigenous peoples or their experience doing curation or their experience in the games industry whatsoever. There's a lot of us I live in what's currently known as the United States, and there's hundreds of nations and tribes, all with their own languages, cultures, and art. And across the world, there are thousands and thousands of Indigenous cultures, and many of us make games. Also, like, this is a super short workshop and talk thingy, and it can't really make anyone an expert on curating Indigenous games. And honestly, I don't even really feel like that much of an expert, even though I'm giving the workshop. So, yeah. I'm also a part of an Indigenous Game Developers Network, which is open to all people all over the world who are of Indigenous ancestry. So if anyone here wants to join that, get at me later and I can connect you to the people and our little Discord. And yeah, so let's see here. I'm not like a sort of like a diversity, equity, and inclusion like trainer or person. The last time I did a workshop like sort of around like including diverse perspectives, it was actually a dance workshop and not a talk online at all. And I can't really do a dance workshop here because we're online. But because of like my background in dance, we're gonna do a little bit of like touchy-feely stuff in the beginning here. Mostly I'm just going to like ask everyone to like take a moment to consider your own relationship to that you are now on. Indigenous people are defined by our relationship to land, but I feel like every human being is defined by a relationship to the land that we are from the cultures we are from, whether we or not we are currently residing on the land that our family and our cultures are from. All of these different things inform how we interact in the world. So like with these like several questions here, just gonna ask everyone to like reflect on that for like a moment. And because we've been online a lot, I'm actually gonna like just like let people do that for like 2 minutes or so. And yeah. And then like I recommend like standing up and like drawing things or dancing things or writing things or like looking out the window. And then you can like keep all of that. If you want, we can share it later, like either in this space if we have time or like in the Discord later. And after we do that, I'm gonna jump into like some of my more like bullet points talky bits. I feel like for me it's important to like situate ourselves in place before we and our relationship to place and each other before we jump into like more serious things. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna set a timer for like 2 minutes, and I'm gonna play a little bit of music, which you may or may not hear. Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna now that we've like had a moment to like think about this stuff and or not, if like it didn't get to you in during the time, that's fine. I'll just like go through some of the like useful toolkit stuff that I have found in my work. Um and yeah. How do I So like something that I found super important when I'm curating is what is my relationship to the makers, the people that I'm curating, regardless of like what type of work they're making. I find that super useful. Also like relationship, both like to the people around you, to the earth and all of that stuff is one of like the foundational um like core ethics in many indigenous cultures, including Lakota. The like what you are going for is like having a balanced relationship um, with the universe, if that makes any sense. Um, so like questions I like to ask myself is like, do I know what the goals are of the people that I'm curating with their own work? Like what are their goals for their work? Are they representing their people? Are they representing their culture? Are they trying to tell a story, get a job, find funding? Do their goals mesh with my goals uh, as a curator? That goes into how does this fit into my own curation plans? And also, do I know who their people are, where they come from? Do I know anything about their culture, their background? This is just super useful for interacting with people in general, right? To be able to have like some frame of reference for where someone is coming from. And one of the more important things that I have found when I'm working with fellow Indigenous people, but also like in general with any group of people that's multiply marginalized is do you know what circumstances they're creating games or art or whatever they're creating under. Because many Indigenous people are dealing with complex intersections of like racism and colonization and a lack of access to computers, internet, sometimes basic food and education. So like having that frame of reference when you're interacting with people can be super valuable. Um, let's see here. Eh, Cultural competency, it's really huge and like can't really fit into a slide. That's why there's like several question marks. So these are just like some things that I found useful. Um, Super common when I with Indigenous people is having other non-Indigenous people assume that our culture and our people are dead. That's a little bit rude. It happened to me often when I was living in Europe. Um, uh, Cultural competency is also almost impossible to do for every aspect of someone's culture. Um, the most important thing to remember is that we are all going to fuck up, and being willing to learn goes a long, long way. And like professional respect of people and respect of other people as human beings is like a huge, like one of the biggest parts about cultural competency. Um, Something that is specific to Indigenous curation and working with Indigenous peoples is that some aspects of culture may be closed to outsiders, and that's for our own protection. It's very common for people to um, appropriate parts of our culture and spirituality and use it to make money. Um, you get that a lot with people pretending to be shamans and like selling people supposed sacred experiences. Um, so when you're working with people, they may have like parts of their culture that they're just not going to talk about you with, and that's just a thing that will happen. Yeah, the again, like this is not doesn't make any these bullet points don't make any of us like experts in cultural competency because that's I think that's kind of impossible. Yeah, just like be kind, that's all. Professional courtesy. This is something that I've run into quite a lot with working in the arts in general, that there's often not a lot of professional courtesy, and even less so for like working with Indigenous people and multiply marginalized people in general. Um, uh, Clear communication about resources, deadlines, and artist support can be extremely important. Uh, when people are working on like the margins of things, false promises about like funding and like what you can provide as a curator can like be potentially deadly to someone who is expecting to not only support themselves but like possibly their entire family based on like what people are promising them. And that can be very, very difficult to manage. Um, uh, It's also super common in all industries, but especially games and arts, that Indigenous people will always be hired as either contracts or consultants and never given the same workplace protections as people who are hired on full time. So if you're in the position to hire people in your organization, just that's something to think about. Like if you're Indigenous or BIPOC employees are all consultants or on short-term contracts, and none of the non-Indigenous people are, that might be something to consider. Um, yeah. And like checking off diversity boxes in general is dehumanizing to the participants and ultimately to yourself as well. Because when we devalue the people around us, are inevitably devaluing ourselves as well, kind of thing. So, yeah. And like again, coming back around to like how like where are we coming from and how does place and culture affect how you curate and how you create events and all that sort of thing. We can talk about it probably in Discord later because like the technical problems doesn't give us a lot of time here right now. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be in Discord. I'll be around. So yeah. And feel free to share with me any like drawings or if you like made a dance or something. I love it.
I'd love to, if you are up for it, Hex, I'd love to just take 5 minutes extra for the tech problems, because I feel like this isn't something we should just rush out of, you know, like maybe you want to take 5 more. If you're done, you want to chat in Discord, totally okay. But yeah,
Oh,
I don't
totally.
want to be rushed.
Happy to spend some time here. I was just worried about like moving into the next session. So
Yeah, it's very
yeah.
kind, and I usually I'm very strict about time, but in this case, I just feel like it's important, and yeah, we'll just start a couple minutes late in the next one. Yeah. I have a question. I don't know. Sometimes I'm curious about this process, this like human process of understanding who someone is and how they are in relation to their communities. It's like very nuanced. Do you have any suggestions on how to like go about that, or how you do it, how you see how people are in relation to their communities?
It takes time to get to know and understand like the like interconnections of any community. I like for me, like it's impossible to just like show up and be able to understand that. It takes time to make connections. Like, yeah, take time, talk to people. Like, yeah, there's no like easy way to do that, you know, like it's just, it takes time and investment into, yeah.
Yeah, I really feel that. And I feel like it's hard when people are working together internationally and there's different languages and different cultures and communities, because it does take time. Like it's a lot easier when you're working in like a very specific local context. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions or anything? Some comments in the chat, some love in the chat.
I'm
Yeah.
relatively late to this, but I do have a question because I happen to know indigenous media, like journalists or media newsroom founders in, I want to say Montana, and she oftentimes mentions a lack of funding, but also community interest in their own in her own content. Do you find that common in the game circle as well?
I would say yes, like funding is almost always a complicated and difficult thing, particularly if you're Indigenous, and especially if this person that you're talking about is based in the United States. There's very little arts
Yeah,
funding
she
and
is.
very little game funding. And most of the funding that does exist for people doing games and like playful media type stuff is private funders. They'll be like the same people that are funding tech startups. And so you have to pitch to them, and they usually only fund people who look like them and talk like them, kind of thing. So that becomes a problem. And there isn't a lot of, outside of specific Indigenous circles, there isn't a lot of interest in our stories or the games that we make. Which is part of the reason why we have like our own networks, so we can like share the cool things we do with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. I should connect you with her. I think,
I would love that.
yeah. Let me do it after this.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time maybe for a quick one from Nico, and then we'll go. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation, for your questions. Those are super useful. Right now, I'm working on community-based research creation through minimal game design. I'm working with a community in Pisac, Cusco, in the Sacred Valley of the Incas. And my whole research, it has to deal also with indigenous, not only representation, but also participation on media production. And I've seen a huge difference, like there are like many structural inequalities still But when looking at the experiences on the communities that like are in the complex territory of US or Canada, it's pretty different than the ones that I've seen in Latin America, also as a complex context, but to just refer to that region. So I wanted to know if you have had experiences in other regions too, while curating your work. Have you seen like any patterns, things in common, or even, I don't know, like I really wanted to know about your experience, and thank you again.
Oh, totally. Yeah, most of my experience has been in as far as curation has been in the US. I've had some experience in Canada and some experience in Europe, but not much in like Central or South America. Um, I would love to, like, I want to know more about like how things are and what people are doing. Um, uh, for me, there's also a little bit of a language barrier because the only language I speak well is English. So yeah. Yeah, if you want to like talk about stuff later, I'd love to learn about like what you're doing and like what folks are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, there are requests for the questions in the Discord if you want to share them. So we'll wrap up this session now and we can connect people in the Discord. Thank you so much, Hex. I'm so glad that you got to speak today and I look forward to hearing more.
Thank
Lou,
you.
you want to